The hype train can be a cruel mistress, can't she? For as much as we'd like to hop on board and say, come on fellows, let's ride off into the sunset drinking tequila and having a righteously good time, it's also a service that sometimes abruptly hits a massive bump in the road, aka the reviews of said game, and throws everyone and itself off the tracks. Fueled by money that we'll never see again, the wreckage takes everything down with it. Reputations, customer trust, and of course the developers who made the contraption in the first bloody place. Yet instead of learning from this rather harrowing experience, we dust ourselves off and head back to the station to buy yet another ticket for another hit of hype. We're suckers, we've been conditioned to be so, and the 10 games on this list, well, we fell for them hook, line and sinker and hated ourselves after purchasing them. So let's form a circle of trust and admit some hard truths today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 times you hated yourself for buying a video game. Number 10, Destiny 2. Despite its world-class gunplay, the original Destiny launched in an infuriatingly piecemeal state, with only the bare bones of an actual campaign, a totally forgettable story, and an empty end game with a disappointing focus on soulless loot grind repetition. Destiny did improve substantially with the post-launch expansions, and so when Destiny 2 was eventually revealed, fans were optimistic that Bungie had learned their lessons from the game's first reportedly strained development. And though Destiny 2 was similarly a well-engineered shooter with terrific visuals, the tide quickly turned when it became clear just how lackluster the launch content was once again. The story was more pronounced this time, but still incredibly underwhelming. The class system was, air quotes, streamlined considerably from the first game, and effectively Destiny 2 just felt like less of a game than the original did following the release of its final expansion. How can you be called Destiny when your lineage is greater than your most recent game? Needless to say, a lot of fans were annoyed about this mediocre launch. Number 9. Aliens Colonial Marines. The number of video games based on movies that are actually worth playing is embarrassingly low, and the Aliens franchise has certainly proven itself no exception to this over the years. Yet that didn't stop fans from buying into the hype for Aliens Colonial Marines, largely due to the involvement of the Borderlands developers Gearbox Software, and thanks to a convincing vertical slice trailer that meant pre-orders for this game went through the bloody roof. But as it turned out, Colonial Marines was a crushing disappointment, touting markedly worse graphics than the marketing implied while being rife with debilitating glitches and atrocious AI. There was no way that anyone who got this on day one didn't feel buyer's remorse. Luckily, reviews hit hard and fast as soon as they could, relegating this to its proper place, the bargain bin. Number 8, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Once upon a time, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series was a critical and commercial juggernaut, though most of that goodwill sadly evaporated when the series transitioned from the original developers of Neversoft to Robomodo. Their first major release, Tony Hawk Ride, was in short an absolute joke and managed to not only handle like pure ass, but also make you look like a total idiot when trying to play it. After a slew of, let's just say, less than satisfying releases, we were all ready to give up hope when suddenly Robomodo announced Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, a full numbered main entry release which we were promised would be the proper advancement of the franchise. But oh my lord, what a mess this was. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 has become by far the worst reviewed game in the series, criticized for its obtuse controls, uninspired level design, mediocre graphics, and abundance of bugs which still haven't been fixed, by the way. This was a punishment to the fans loyal enough to follow this franchise, and the only grinding being done now was that of our bloody teeth and frustration. Number 7, Mass Effect Andromeda. Your face is tired? Well, so am I after the absolute letdown that was Andromeda. With Mass Effect 3's ending, we became aware that BioWare wasn't perfect. But you know what? We all gave them the benefit of the doubt because, I mean, look at their back catalogue of games. This was just a blip, right? Wrong! Fans desperate for a huge budget AAA sci-fi adventure happily took EA's promises that Andromeda was going to be the next big thing at their word. And my lord, were we gut-punched for our support. From the game's subpar facial animations to its array of glitches, boring plot and repetitive gameplay loop, the only decent thing about it was the combat, and when you're rushing through a game just to get into fights, you know that you've bought an absolute whale of a stinker. Number 6, Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem Forever was the first major entry into the hit shooter franchise in almost a decade, and spent so long in development before its eventual 2011 release that fans and critics alike had nicknamed it Duke Nukem Taking Forever. It was painfully obvious to anyone who even vaguely followed the game's development that the end result was going to be a complete mess, and yet fans couldn't help themselves. It was going to be a train wreck, but we all wanted first-class tickets for some reason. As predictably as the sun rising, Duke Nukem Forever was panned in almost every department. The graphics, gameplay, level design, frequency of bugs, and generally dated nature of its presentation were just appalling across the board. And the only good thing to come from this is to say that Duke's dated design and mindset hopefully died along with this title. Number 5, WWE 2K20. Just look at these glitches. Look at them. This should not be happening in 2020, my friends. What the actual fresh hell is going on with this franchise? It's like a game that has been built on an empire of sand that is just slowly sinking into the ground, and yet we always buy them. Maybe it's just because we hope and pray that one day we'll get a game that doesn't just run well, but actually runs full stop on launch. Oh well, at least they're not making a game this year, right? No, instead they've just dusted off the engine from All Stars instead. God damn it. And yes, I am going to get this game. And yes, I hate myself for it already. Number 4, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Okay, so let's just clear this up. In its current state, I actually really enjoy this game. It's fun, frantic, and has had a lot of its issues ironed out. But when this game dropped, my God, was there a backlash. Everyone hated this game and its lousy pay-to-win mentality, as rightly they should, and we all felt like absolute chumps for believing that EA and DICE were going to deliver the experience that they'd promised at the beginning. Not even the campaign managed to escape unscathed, as this too promised a real look into being part of the dark side, only to turn the protagonist to the rebels side about 3 missions in and just became a bland and generic tale of, well, very little thanks to the fact that the devs weren't allowed to do much with the license. Needless to say, when Battlefront 3 inevitably materializes, we should take everything EA says about it with a galactic truckload of salt. Number 3, Spore. Spore was one of the most anticipated video games of the early 2000s, and because it was being developed by Maxis, the team behind The Sims, fans felt that they could trust the end result was going to be nothing short of perfection. Spore's enticing hook was that the player would be able to control a species' development from its prototypical stages all the way to a period of intergalactic evolution. It's an incredible concept, right? And one that was appealingly evidenced by early gameplay footage. But unfortunately, the end product amounted to be, well, basically just a depressingly scaled back, simplified rendition of those wonderful ideas. Ultimately, Spore was a high-functioning Tamagotchi comprised of 5 mini-game-like stages, none of which offered up anything close to the complexity or granularity promised by earlier presentations. If you look at the user versus critical scores of this game, then you'll see that outlets absolutely loved this title, but those who paid for it rather than receive review copies, which were probably free, were much less enthused. And to top it off, because this was a PC exclusive, you couldn't even trade it in. Great. Number 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 was the IP's first outing on the PS3 and Xbox 360, and Sega promised fans that this was going to be the Sonic game that truly moved Sonic along as a character and would cement him as the mainstay mascot of old. And when pre-release press previews came out, they were glowing, so things actually looked truly promising. But as it turned out, the game wasn't merely just another passably mediocre Sonic offering, but genuinely one of the worst games ever made starring the character. The awkward camera and controls, excessive loading times, boring levels, and overabundance of glitches pushed this title into a meme instantly, and it was so skin-invertingly awkward in places that you had to think that this was just a cruel prank played on us by the Sonic devs. And you know what? We still reward them for their broken games to this day. Remember, Sonic Mania wasn't made by the original dev team. Everything that they have touched has been a mess in some form or another. So please, for the love of the blue blur, just wait for the reviews. And number 1, The Order 1886. The Order 1886 was one of the most eagerly anticipated video games of the PS4's early life cycle, and seemed to live up to the console's high benchmark for its exclusive titles. Yet, many players were dismayed then when reviews were embargoed until the day before release, and it turned out that the game was, despite solid shooter gameplay and admittedly gorgeous graphics, a colossal disappointment. Players and critics alike were largely underwhelmed by the game's mere 5-hour length, considering it came with a full AAA launch price, and the lack of additional features such as an online multiplayer really hurt its ratings. But players really only had themselves to blame, because it was made abundantly clear before the Order's release that it would actually be a very short game. Ready at Dawn flat out admitted that it would run most players 8 to 10 hours, which when factoring in generous dev maths, that is halving their estimations, would have indicated a 5-hour playtime for the majority. But this is the thing, if you'd spent £50 on a relatively forgettable 5-hour game, how could you not be pissed, even if you clearly should have known better? And there we go, those were 10 times you hated yourself for buying a video game. I hope that you enjoyed that, my friends, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. If you want to chat to me further, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0. But before I go, I just want to talk to you about one thing. We spoke today at length about times that you hated yourself for buying a video game. And you know what, I'm just going to extrapolate a bit from that sentence and say that I hope that you are not hating on yourself for no good reason, my friend. You are an absolute bloody ledge. You deserve love, happiness, and success, as we all do as humans. So I hope that you're being kind to yourself, or at least as fair as you possibly can be to yourself mentally. You're not a bad person, you're not a villain, so I really hope that you're not treating yourself as such. Big love from me to you, my friend. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon.